Welcome back to another edition of the Let's Talk Show. Tonight, I will be joined by my good friend, clinical psychotherapist Avi Benmordechai. I will wait for him to join the live before we start our very, spontaneous discussion. This wasn't a live that we were planning to do. And last minute, we decided our schedules got open and cleared up. So why not do a live? We haven't done one in a while. So we both agreed that it's a nice idea to come on to Facebook Live and have a nice discussion about a very, very important topic. I think that Avi is joining me, so I will request him. And we will. It's live. Avi, are you there? There he is. How are you?
Hello.
Thank you for joining me. It's like a last minute decision where we both had our schedules clear up. And here we are doing another Facebook Live. It's been some time, definitely been some time.
Yes, it's been some time, and I'm so glad to be able to do this with you today. We, right before we got on this live, Yocheved and I had a chance to talk today, and being that it was like such an impromptu live that there was not much planning, we said, like, what are we going to talk about? What's something that can be so relatable for anybody to just join in and take something from what we share here today and apply it to your life, or just help somebody in your family with some of the things that we're going to be talking about here today. So what's on your mind today?
So first of all, I would like to why don't you introduce yourself while we wait for more people to join us?
Sure.
Tell us what you do.
Sure. So I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist. I work with families, with children, with couples, with teens, doing different types of mental health work: depression, anxiety, PTSD, which we're actually going to talk a little bit about today, OCD, being able to build healthier relationships, whether with parents and teenagers and kids, or with couples. One of the interesting parts of what I do also is called pet therapy. I work with a lot of different animals: dogs, cats, parrots, bunnies. We recently got a horse, which Yocheved, you saw before, and which is a very interesting type of therapy. It's a very interesting tool to use when working with people. So my goal today when working with Yocheved, who needs no introduction at all because she is a renowned human being, a person with so many skills and talents, and a very beloved community member. We are so happy.
Making me really laugh. Thank you for that introduction.
Happy to do this live today to talk a little bit about, just life, without any labels, because a lot of times people feel, and this happens to me a lot when I talk to people. They say, and they find out if I'm a therapist, they're like, oh, what's my diagnosis? Or stop psychoanalyzing me, or tell me what's wrong with me, or I'm crazy, I have so many issues. And it's
You know what's wrong with someone?
Well, I mean, that's part of what I do, is try to figure out. But I'm like, you know what? Let's let's be human and just normalize a lot of the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. There's so much that goes on in our life, whether it's with work or with school or with our spouse or with our kids or with our family members, where a lot of the times we don't need to have a specific label. And it's also for us to be able to recognize that this is what makes us human, is being able to have all these different types of emotions that we experience.
It's funny you say that, and I know you may disagree because, your field of work, but also my field of work as a physician assistant, it is a real diagnosis. But I feel like sometimes we over-label people. For example, the diagnosis of ADHD. Attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or inattentive type. So like there's two different types of ADD. And I feel like if you really were to analyze every single person, some sort of component is going to be present in most individuals. So I feel like sometimes
100%. Yeah.
overuse a lot of these
Yeah.
OCD. Well, I could be OCD about certain aspects of my life too. You know,
Oh,
like
yeah.
if something is very important for me, like how I keep my makeup organized, right? Like what time I get to work every day and
Yeah.
being on time. So
Yeah.
we all have some component of OCD. I think that the time to start seeking help is when those conditions interfere with our daily life. Like
100%.
as long as you're able to live your life, you're good. It gets you what you got to do. You focus because your hyper focus is actually getting you to the places you have to get to. Good for you. Nothing's wrong with you. But as soon as it interferes with your quality of life, where you're so zoned out that you're forgetting where you parked your car because like you're so not focused, or you forget to turn the stove off, I mean, and almost cause a fire. I mean, when things are starting to interfere with your life, or you're so OCD that you're going crazy every time you come home and things are not where you want them to be, and
Mm.
you're like arguing with your spouse and your children and having this panic attack, then that's a time to start saying, all right, I need help here. I
Yeah.
got to take care of myself. So I think it's important for people to know that, yes, we all have some components of these titles.
Yeah.
And it's fine. We're normal. What's
100%.
abnormal is when it interferes with your quality of life.
Yeah. Um, Interesting, because I was actually talking to somebody, and as I'm sitting here behind me, if you see all of these like different reminders and all these different things I have on the wall. Yeah, I'm actually still in my office now. And sometimes even I look at it on a day to day, and I'm like, I should do a little bit more of that, and I should do more of that. Oh, that's a great reminder
What
for
does it say there?
myself, you know? Huh?
What does it say there? What are those things?
There's just like a bunch of different things. Like one says like a bunch of different reminders of, that you're valid and your feelings are valid, and how to set appropriate boundaries, and some grounding techniques. Like when you're highly anxious, what do you need to do? Like in the moment, how do you stay more mindful when you're highly triggered? Learning what your circle of control is, and that what's not part of your circle of control, right? Like for example, you're in control over your behaviors and how you respond. You are not in control of what other people do or other people's opinions. So like just different small reminders just to keep you in check, just to keep you in your lane. Because sometimes, being that we live such a hectic, busy life, and can be even a very stressful life just because of what's going on in the world, it's really important to have those daily reminders. And I remember I once finished the session, and as the person was leaving, I was looking at the wall, and I was like, "Oh, this is such a good reminder for me." And the person mentioned, like, "Oh, like you also like read this?" I'm like, "Of course I read this. I'm human too," Or the concept of going to therapy and just talking about our own stuff that we're dealing with, living with, because we all go through some type of whether it's a trauma or some kind of pain, and just to be able to reprocess that, which actually leads me to another topic when we were talking before we got on this live, was being able to like deal with past traumas. What's interesting is like, so did you ever have this? If you were like in second or third grade or fourth grade, and sometimes the teacher would, you knew she would make everybody read in class, and she would like maybe go on to every student and call on them, and when it was your turn, and possibly like you would read the paragraphs ahead of time and counting them and thinking which one is yours, so you quickly reread it, making sure you don't make any mistakes, right?
And you know
That's
what?
anxiety.
All of a sudden, when you're reading out loud,
You
you make
mess up.
so many mistakes.
Yeah,
And it's like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to know how to read this. Why am I making so many mistakes?
exactly.
I know you're trying to get into that topic, but as you're talking, I have a question for you.
Yeah,
Maybe you can help me understand this because it doesn't make sense in my own mind, okay?
sure. Yeah,
Totally off topic, but like literally just came to my mind. I
okay.
think it's kind of funny. It's not really funny, but it is funny for me. How do you answer this question? If I'm
Yeah,
a public speaker, right?
yeah.
And I could speak so well in public and on Facebook, and there's thousands of people watching. Why is it when I'm asked to make a toast and stand up in front of like 7 people at a table, and let's say give a birthday wish or like something nice, like a whatever. Why am I stuck? Why can't I? Why is it like the brain freezes and you're like, I can't give a toast? It's almost like you're lying, because what does that mean? You can't give a toast. You
Yeah.
speak in front of so many people, and when it comes to giving a toast, why is our brain like some parts of our brain works for certain things, and then
Yeah.
another part of our brain is like, wait, I'm supposed to know how to do this. Why am I not able to do it? How do you answer that?
Well, that's a
Therapy
very
101
interesting.
live. Okay, let's change the session,
Well,
please.
I'm gonna say this disclaimer. This is not therapy, but what I would say is, whenever you are giving a lecture, whenever you're giving a speech, you are definitely preparing ahead of time. You are thinking about what you're gonna say. You know your agenda. You get up there, you say your message, and then you're done. When you say a toast for somebody, it forces you to kind of look through your files in your brain and think about your relationship with that person. Also, like, for example, let's just say this person is very dear to you, right? That you have to get really vulnerable. You have to really kind of open up Pandora's box and pick out those specific things that connect you and that person. And sometimes, like, for example, for in my family, right, my wife is very sensitive when she speaks in public, and every time she gets up and it's somebody's birthday who really means a lot to her, she cries every single time. And there are people who do that, right? And you wonder, like, why are you crying, right? Because it's their way of getting vulnerable. Some people, so naturally, people who have a hard time of getting vulnerable or sharing vulnerability, it could be that it's almost like blocked off, because they know once it's opened up, once you open up Pandora's box, everything is going to come out. So those people are usually ones who like to be more contained. Do you feel any of that for you?
No.
Interesting. So what do you think it is?
Because I would say that I am very vulnerable. I'm the type to like be an open box.
Yeah,
It's almost like loss of words, completely frozen. Like,
it could.
you can see some people when they make a toast, I'm like, can I take notes? The blessings that come out of their mouth and the way like they have so much to say.
Yeah.
And then when they have to speak in public, it's totally different. But when they make a toast, they are amazing at it,
Yeah.
right? And then I'm almost like distracting myself, like, please don't pick on me. It's like, like you don't want to raise your hand, or like, please don't pick on me. And it's really awkward. So I'm thinking to myself, and that question came up to me when you asked that second, third grade question. I don't remember. I know that therapists always like to go back to their childhood trauma. And I don't remember ever having this like weird moment to say like, oh, maybe it absolutely makes no sense, but I just shared it because I'm sure that somebody who's watching, they have this in a different aspect of their life. Like, you may be able to be an amazing teacher, for example, and then you come home to your kids and you have to do homework with them and you're just stuck. You don't know how to give them the tools. And meanwhile, you're a teacher. You're supposed to know how to teach kids. But when you come home, I'm just like throwing an example out there, you may not be, or you may be the most amazing therapist, and it comes to your spouse. Like I'm saying, why is it that certain parts of our life, we're so good in ABC, but then we get to another area, and that same thing that we're supposed to be so good at, we are terrible at it?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say terrible, but I hear what you're saying, and this is so normal. Also, we wear different hats, right? Like, I remember I was talking to, I think it was one of my siblings, and something was going on there, and I asked them a question, and they weren't like really responding. I'm like, tell me what the answer is. And they said to me, they were like, would you say this to your clients? And would you say this to one of your clients? And I'm like, you're not my client. You're my sibling. So tell me what it is, So for sure. And we wear different hats, and that's okay too. I don't psychoanalyze my friends or my family members or, my spouse, or I don't do that, right? Everybody has a different type of role. But for example, for you, whenever you have to speak in public, it's interesting. I would say, like, tap into that. And that's something you can kind of ask your inner self, like, what is it that's making me hold off? It possibly is maybe going to be because once I started giving that toast, I'm going to have to tap into a very specific part of my heart, and I don't know if I'm ready to do that. I don't know if I'm ready to show all the people what I'm really, feeling inside of my heart. And being that you and I know you very well, right? Because you've been in my family for so many years, right? And you are one of the most genuine people out there, and very confident with being vulnerable and things like that. But when you're sharing something in such a private event, it takes, like, you have to kind of dig deep, and that can take some strength sometimes. So it's interesting that you mentioned that sometimes people find it hard to be able to apply what they have out there in the world in their own family. But that's the same reason why doctors can't perform surgery for their family or friends, because they're biased in that case, right? That's why therapy would be the most ineffective for a therapist to treat their family or friends. That's why it's not done. What do you
It's not
think?
just surgery, anything. Like when you
Yeah,
call your family member who's in the medical field, for some reason, like you can't diagnose them. Like if a patient came over to your office and said, "Hey, I stubbed my toe. What is this?" And it's like the most basic thing. And then
yeah,
a family member is going to come and say, "Hey, I stubbed my toe. What do I have?" And you're like,
yeah,
not really sure. And you sound
yeah,
like you're so stupid. And meanwhile, they're like, "Don't you do this for a living? How don't you know something like
yeah,
this?" It's weird like that. Like when it comes to people you get so awkward and you all of a sudden are lost. You're like,
yeah.
why is it happening that way?
Right. Well, think about it. You have a personal relationship with that person, and it's different. They're in a different category of people. Obviously, we want to help everybody equally, but we're biased because they are your family member, and obviously you want to do the best you can for them. And sometimes, our imposter syndrome kicks in, thinking like, oh, maybe we're not that good enough. Maybe you should really seek out a professional. Maybe you should go speak to somebody else because I'm not good enough for you, because you need somebody greater. It can also be a touch of that as well. So for every single case, there can be a different example. Obviously, I even shared my opinion with you because we're just doing a live. We're not even in a therapy session now. But if I would be exploring this in a therapy session, I would ask the person, like, well, that's interesting. Like, what do you think it is? Like, why do you think it's hard for you to share that? And then they would say, well, and I would give them different options, and then they would pick something, and we would explore that and go further with that. I wouldn't necessarily bring my own opinions to this conversation, but being that we're talking here, I just shared my own thoughts with you.
Well, we like to hear your thoughts, so
All
you
right.
can keep sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah.
Question.
So,
As
yeah.
you're talking, we're going to go back to the original topic, which is feeling stuck.
Yeah.
Very, very commonly, I'm going to go to a very common scenario. Let's touch on somebody who is going through a divorce or
Mm,
has been divorced.
yeah.
And they know that they want to move on in their life and they want to get remarried and they're still young, or even if you're older, but they're stuck because they remember the way their first husband or wife treated them. It was very disrespectful, or they were cheated on. There was infidelity, whatever the reason may be. And now they have this like feeling that all men or all ladies are the same. How
Yeah.
does somebody, after going through something so traumatic, in their own mind, it's traumatic because they got married thinking they're going to live this happily ever after. And they were also thinking of the good and it didn't work out. How do they now go to somebody else and not worry that this too is going to be a failure? How
Yeah.
do you move past your trauma in the sense of that's also a trauma, like this post-traumatic stress where you're stressed every time you even think of the concept of dating? How do you
Mm.
move past that?
It's tough to give one specific answer, but just as a generalization, and obviously with this live, there's some limitations because every single case is so different. So, as we speak, even for men and women, it can be so different. But one of the biggest things, specifically when it comes to divorce, is the feelings of failure. Nobody really gets married to get divorced. People want to get married to stay married. And when that all happens, their world, their empire comes crashing. Everything they thought that they're going to build, all their hopes and dreams, everything comes crashing. And they feel like, how am I supposed to rebuild where my whole world just crumbled in front of me? So being able to overcome first of all, number one is grieving the loss, which is even all the 5 stages: anger, bargaining, denial, depression, all acceptance, all of those different stages at all at different times. It doesn't necessarily always happen in order. and being able to rebuild resilience, because being able to go through something like that is extremely, extremely difficult for a person, especially whenever there's children involved. The first case is also safety. A lot of the times finances is a very big concern, and also who's going to have custody of over the children. And a lot of the times parents feel like, oh, if we're divorced now, are my children going to side with his side? Are my children going to side with my side? What's going to be? How do I keep my children also seeing that I was not at fault in this relationship? How do I still maintain a healthy relationship with my children? There's so much that goes in play there. And also at the same time, how can I trust another person if somebody betrayed me? You know,
Yeah,
so
how can you trust another person? What
exactly.
are
And it
some
takes,
steps? How do we just move past that? Like, what are, I know it's hard to say. I'm not asking you to like just right there,
yeah,
but if you were to give a pointer, let's say you were to write an article on this particular topic,
yeah.
what is a piece of advice you can give somebody who is feeling stuck and is afraid to start dating again because they're worried that they're gonna get messed up again?
Yeah.
What is that one thing you could tell someone that like to give them that push?
Yeah. First of all, I would talk about the number one thing before they even start dating would be healing the self, healing themselves, healing the pain that they experienced, and being able to rebuild their own empire as an individual. A lot of the times, people have something called codependency,
Mm.
where they feel like there's no place in the world for them as an individual, meaning they must be in a relationship, they must be married. And I hear this so many times, especially, I'm not calling out any specific communities, but certain communities, if a person gets divorced, if a person um, fell out of a relationship, there's no such thing time for grieving. Okay, you got divorced. All right, come on, you're back on it. Let's go. Go back to dating. You need to be married. You need to be married, right? Sometimes a person also needs some time for themselves to rebuild their own empire. When they feel content and fully love and accept themselves for who they are, only then can they actually step out and go into a relationship. Because anytime,
Right, but let's stop right there. When you say they need time to heal, there are some people that are taking too much time to heal. There
really,
should also be like, when you say there's time to be sad, but make sure you know when to stop feeling sad because you can't be sad for too long. There's
okay,
time to grieve and to time to build an empire. But I'm just saying this for those who are watching that are like already at a stage where every single day that's ticking by is a day lost, right? So yes, you want to build an empire and you want to say it's time to grieve and it's time to, there's no codependency. We're good enough even on our own. We don't necessarily have to move on. I get all that. But
who makes who makes that timeline? Who says
I
if it's
want
too
to
much?
know, at what point in life do we say, at what point in life, let's say I'm a parent, okay?
Okay,
And I have a
okay,
child who's 27 years old. And he has been through a very bad dating process. I'm just making this up.
fine.
He went out with a girl. They didn't work out. They were close to getting married. The invitations were sent out. Everything was sent out. And right before the wedding, something happens and the wedding got called off. Now, this son is traumatized because the girl messed him up. Let's say he finds out she was dating someone else at the same time. Whatever it may be, okay? Now, you're 27, and you're going to say, well, so what? Who said you have to get married by 28? Well, I say at this point that, yes, 27, we got to start dating. We got to start moving on. I'm not a believer of being married when you're 50 for the first time, okay? That's just my personal thing. We got to start moving on. We have families to build. So if I'm a parent of this 27-year-old child, I'm going to give him space, like you're saying. He's a big boy. I'm not supposed to baby him. I get it. So how much time? 6 months, 7 months went by. And he's now saying, I'm not ready to get married. I got to build for myself. I'm going to establish myself because let's pretend the other girl that he was supposed to get married, she ends up dating some rich guy. And now in his own mind, he's thinking the reason she canceled me is because I can't provide like him. So now he's building in his own thoughts, right? in order for me to be loved again, I gotta be XYZ. I gotta make a certain amount of money as a living. Why? Because he was traumatized. This is what he built in his head. That may not happen for the next 15 years, his plans, right? His like vision. So what are we going to do? We're going to wait for his vision and like, oh, it's time for me to now live for myself. And I need to know that I'm good enough. I don't have to get married. That's wrong. Because no, you do. Like, you can't just get stuck. So how do you move on and say it's time to grieve, but we're going to give it a time frame? How much time?
Are you ready for this?
Yes. Now I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay, that was a loaded question, and it had some very interesting twists and turns.
Well, they're coming to me as I speak, so I was sharing them with you.
If I can jump into your mind and just take a look around, I would love to see what's happening there. But to answer your question, and this goes back to why I said what I said, which was you have to work on yourself first. Okay. Sometimes I get a request, and especially when I work with young adults, especially males, they come in and if they broke up with their girlfriend or they broke up with their fiance, and they come in and they say, "Therapist Avi, you have to make me win her back. My life is destroyed if I don't get her back. Tell me what I have to do to win her back." Right? That's their agenda. They come in with a specific agenda. She broke my heart. She dumped me. I have to get her back. What do I have to do? Change me. Tell me. I'm going to do it. I'm pumped, right? And obviously, I'm not going to deter them, because if that's their goal, sure, I'll help them with their goal. Okay. But with exploring even more, I will ask specific questions and ask questions about the relationship to make them think, do they even want a relationship like that? They're fighting for something so hard, but stop. Let's analyze. You're willing to put in so much, but is it even worth it? Do you even want a person who doesn't want you, but wants something that you have or possibly don't have yet? So at that point, when the person, like you said, and the whole twist was, which was interesting, when you said that this guy, let's say, feels terrible that this girl left him and went to another guy who has more money, that means this person has a very low self-esteem and a feeling of low self-worth. Because if they feel like their worthiness only comes from money, then that's definitely a category that we need to work on. Going back to my original statement, which was we need to rebuild the self. Do you know how many people have low confidence, low self-esteem, low self-worth, feeling so worthless, feeling like they're no good enough? And a lot of, where does this all come from? And I know you said, oh, all these therapists love to talk about childhood, but think about it. Our base of who we are comes from childhood. That's the most crucial time.
Or from our community's expectations.
Yes, from our community's expectations, but also from childhood. Meaning, if your childhood upbringing is so well done, where you are built in a way where your parents or caregivers gave you the proper guidance and the proper tools to make you feel like you're good enough, the community, of course, the people around us and who we surround ourselves with is very important. But a person like that will be able to stand up to resistance. But a person who doesn't have the proper foundation, anytime somebody says something about them, all they're going to do is try to readjust and change just to be a people pleaser. There's so many people out there who don't know how to stand up for themselves, who feel like they give permission to others to walk all over them, who don't know how to say no, who have a hard time setting healthy boundaries with their in-laws, having a hard time setting boundaries with their spouses, which is also very important. You know, being able to know what's okay and what's not okay. Or even when a person is dating, just to be able to have some self-respect. You know what's interesting? And I don't want, the concept of like chivalry is dead. You know, this is just me. This is just me, okay? And I know a lot of people will possibly be against what I have to say. And I know, like, obviously, healthy chasing is like cute and it's nice, right? But this whole concept of like the guy has to fight for the girl to the point where like he's fighting with the parents and there's people so much against it, and chasing the girl, and the girl rejects him over and over and over again, and he does all these like things, and he's like fighting right to get this girl. I understand it, his motivation, but also at the same time, and this is just me, if somebody is pushing you away so far away, just take a hint, take a message, and back off. A person who has some self-respect and some self-esteem will say, you know what? You don't want me? No problem. I will go and meet with somebody else. So this whole concept of like fighting for the girl and fighting with the parents and fighting with like half of the family, that's something that a person needs to explore. Like, why are you fighting so hard? These are things that should come. A unit should begin with peace and harmony.
You see why I laughed. Why I laughed. Agree with you 100%. But like with everything, there's always exceptions to the rule.
Okay, for sure.
Right. I totally agree. I don't think we should ever have to like, why do we have to chase you? But there are circumstances, I know it firsthand, it happened to me, so I'm talking from personal experience.
Okay.
There are circumstances in which you do have to fight. Because if you don't fight and you just say, well, it's not meant to be, that's it, sometimes you will lose something very, very important or valuable. Let me clarify. Sometimes the girl says no to you. You know why. It's not because she doesn't want you. The background noise is coming. There's pressure from the parents. There's pressure from other people about where is he from? What does he do? Who are his parents? What's his last name? Blah, 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 blah. Now, she cannot fight the background noise. She can't. There's too many. She lives with those people, right? Her parents, her siblings, her grandparents. So her ultimatum would be to the guy, it's not gonna work out. But they have a very good chemistry together. It would have worked out had she not had that background noise. So if you see that there is something there, but the reason it's not working out is because of outside circumstances, right? She says no, but deep down, you as the guy know she does want you. You guys do have good times together. It will work out. But it's that something in the background. I am a believer, I'm different a little bit, that sometimes you have to fight for it.
I agree with every word you're saying, because the difference with what you just said was the girl was for it. If they both wanted, you absolutely go for it, for sure.
Turned to be against it in the middle of it.
So if she has proper communication and she has the guts and the strength to say, look, I really like where this relationship is going. I really like our chemistry. I know we can build a good family together, but I'm dealing with so much resistance from my parents. What could we do, right? A lot of the times rabbis do get involved and they do help, because rabbis are community leaders. And that's why I don't want to say therapists. A therapist is a very private entity. A rabbi is more for families. And they can sometimes get rabbis involved and bring maybe two families together, because if you really think about it, her family possibly could also be coming from a place of fear. They want to make sure, for those who don't know, I recently had I have a 9-month-old baby at home, a girl, and somebody asked me, yeah, thanks. Somebody asked me recently, like, oh, like, what's like marriage life gonna look like for her, like, or like a dating life or things like that. And then for a moment, I just had to think, like, oh my goodness, here I am, putting in so much effort every single day, with every time I feed her or, hold her, do all these different things. And one day somebody's just going to come knock on my door and say, hello, I'm here to marry your daughter. It's like, what are you bringing to the table? You know, I want to make sure that you're a right match. I want to make sure you're a right fit. You know, so I understand where her family is coming from. They're coming from a place of making sure that she's going to the right hands and to the right family.
But you
But
see, there's so many. Okay, I know Bella asked the question. Let me just, I think it's going to address what I'm about to say. Bella said, what if he fights for her to get her, but her parents are very unhappy? Okay, I'm gonna go to this because I'm about to address this. And again, I don't want to get personal because this live is not about me, but I think in order to answer this question, you know, when we go to speak in a public event, the best stories are personal stories, right? When you just say stuff to say stuff, it's one thing. When you say stuff because it's a personal situation, you've been through this and you know you're talking from personal experience, it's a little bit different. We are in a culture in which people are being judged. We're aware of that, okay? People will judge you. Yes, you may say, like, what does this guy have to bring to the table? For example, it's a very nice question. We want to make sure our children go in the right hands. First of all, disclaimer. Sometimes, no matter how much you think they're from a good family, how stable they are as individuals, how much money they make, where they live, whatever it is, until you live with the person, you don't know who this person is. And sometimes everything you ever thought is going to go down the drain. And then you may think it's the worst match ever. You thought this was never going to work. They didn't have a penny to go by when they got married. All of a sudden, they're prospering and they're rich and they're in love. So we have to understand there's always going to be two sides of the story. Now, the reason I had to stop you when you said don't fight for the girl. I mean, like, if she shows resistance, I get what you were saying. I totally get what you were saying. Is because we are in a society, in a culture, not everybody, disclaimer, but me and you come from a background where people are judged based on where they come from. Okay, let's put it like that.
mm-hmm.
Or like what area? Oh, you're from Samarkand, so you are whatever. Oh, you're from Bukhara, so you're right? Like, if depending on the area you come from, you will now adapt and have this badge of, I am now cheap. I'm a person who likes to fight. I'm a person who is always like the big shot because I'm a lady and I come from Samarkand and the ladies from Samarkand are XYZ. And if I'm from Tashkent, then I'm another ZY whatever. So you now have this badge attached to you, right? So we are born in America, okay? So we are modernized. We are living in this country for many years, and our mentalities have adapted to this country, for example. Now, if I'm going out with a guy or a girl, and she comes from a country back where I come from, I'm talking about from the parents' perspective, right? Where I had a really bad experience with somebody from that country because they are whatever label they're known to be. I am now going to, as one of my check marks of what I need for my child to get married, give a hard time to that parent, to that child, because that's not a good match because of where they come from. Or because of his father or his mother did something 10 years ago to a community, and now that's it, you have the scar for life. That's not a fair way of judging a child, right? And there have been many, many marriages that unfortunately get broken up because of these unrealistic titles that we're putting on people for no apparent reason other than what their last name is, where they come from, what kind of prestigious background do they have, like, am I going to be able to meet to the standards of this wedding? Because they're going to make this very expensive wedding. I can't afford this kind of expensive wedding. Right? So now we're going to break this couple up simply because our values are not aligned with this family's values. We're not even looking at the child anymore. We're going past the child.
Yeah.
We're looking at their mother, their father, their grandfather, the country they came from. It's not a fair way of judging somebody. So I feel that sometimes parents will say no to a certain there's certain couple simply from all those other criteria that don't meet, and it's not a fair way of judging someone.
Well, I hear you. I would say though, did you want to say something?
Mama Lisa, avlotash devona na boshe.
What?
She said, avlotash devona na boshe. You understand what that means?
Somebody's not going to get crazy.
Avlot is your
okay.
devona na boshe. You understand? So, which means, let's say your last name, Avi Benmordechai. So, as long as Benmordechai is not known to be a cuckoo last name,
Yeah.
you're good to go. But if it is, then I'm sorry to say, my child cannot, is not going to have an opportunity to go out with this guy or girl.
But you know what I've noticed lately? I don't know if I should call it like a shidduch crisis where people are having a hard time getting married, girls having a hard time finding good guys, and guys having a hard time finding good girls. After some time where parents and grandparents are noticing that things are not working out for this young adult in their family or their son or their grandson or vice versa, then they start to say, you know what, we'll start to be more open-minded. In the beginning, they may think that they have so many options available for them, and they may be picky and choosing in the beginning. But as time goes, they're going to say, you know what, we'll be more open-minded. And this is something I've started to realize, more people becoming more open-minded and accepting people that they wouldn't necessarily accept, just like you said, just because they were from the place where it wasn't like prestigious, let's call it. Also, what you talked about the girl, if the boy and the girl are both in agreement that they want each other, definitely, then there's for sure you fight for that because there's chemistry. There's definitely a foundation there. In so many relationships, for sure, family matters. It would be great if the family is supportive, but in some cases that's not the case. But if the guy and the girl want the relationship, go for it. What I was talking about was where the girl herself does not want the relationship and she keeps pushing him away and he keeps fighting. It happens a lot of the times where I'll speak to girls and they'll say to me how at this point they already call them creeps. They're like, this guy keeps texting me, he keeps harassing me, he sends things to my job, he comes and shows up in front of my job, he does this, he does that, he shows up in front of my doorstep, I say no, he speaks to my community members, he does all these different things, and these things happen. So for that, I'm trying to say is a person needs to work on their own self-esteem and their own self-worth. If they feel they're having a hard time dealing with rejection, that's a deeply rooted issue that they need to work on. Look here, over here, we have some questions. It says, Bella said, and why most of the time girls run after money? Why not dig and be normal? Let's see. Okay, what else do we have? Ilana said, the amount of money that is spent on weddings is starting to sicken me. Interesting. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts. Okay. I can't really say that it's what I'm going to say. It's very hard to say. If a person is really loaded in money, they also have this community's expectations, right? Like when you're going to a wedding in which you know the people are loaded and they really come from a real amount of wealth. Again, this is cultural. Culturally, we've been doing this for many years where the way we celebrate is we throw money. That's just the way culturally we've been celebrating this for many, 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 many years. If the rich people, like very rich people, don't throw any money, we're going to have some people who are going to say, this is just playing devil's advocate, right? For those like just the other side. What is this? Krachabore. They didn't even pay anything. They're so loaded. They didn't even have like a few dollars to put. If they do put, then it's too much. So I feel like it's going to say money is always going to be thrown. But yes, I don't agree to where there is an extremely crazy amount of money.
Something like that is out of our control. We cannot control what people do or what people say or what people think, right? But we can control our own behavior. So let me ask you this question. If somebody throws a very lavish wedding, do you think it's appropriate, and what is the responsibility of us, the guests, to put in the envelope? Does it have, let's say they cover a seat and the seats are now $400 a chair. Let's say the more lavish, expensive chairs, right? $400. By the way, the comment section, if you know of chairs that go for more, let us know, right? $400, I'm saying a pretty lavish chair, because now the norm is about I think the base model is like $250, right? That's the base. Let's say above that is like $400 a chair. Do you think it's the responsibility of a couple to come to this wedding and give an $800 envelope if they know that they have kids at home, they have tuitions to pay, they're paycheck to paycheck with their mortgage, they know they have another 2 weddings this month coming up? Is it their responsibility to pay for their seat?
So definitely not anybody's responsibility to pay for anything. And I will tell you, I'm not paying $800. Okay, so if you're making it or $400 a chair, I'm not paying $800 to come with my husband. So don't invite me if you're waiting for that envelope. But all jokes aside, you know what it is, Avi? The blame is not even going to be on the couple or the family that chooses to have a $400 chair. That's already their choice, that they want hundreds of salads and 50 billion entrees and this crazy dessert. What the problem becomes is it becomes the guest's problem, because if they open that envelope and they know their chairs are costing them $400, and realistically, it's not anybody's job to pay, but it's not like they're going to walk away and say, hey, I decided to pay $400. It's almost like they're going to now say, look at him, cheap. What is this? That's all he gives. He's a doctor. He's a lawyer. He's a therapist. He's making so much money. That's all he brings. So instead of people thinking to themselves, well, I'm the one who chose to make a $400 table, right? It becomes like the guest who's coming is going to get that label of being cheap. So many people are going to try to avoid that, like, name calling. Obviously, if you can't make ends meet, you're going to just do whatever you can. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about specifically people that are known to have a career. Okay, they are known to make good money. Let's say they're very prestigious makeup artists. I'm just gonna, like, whatever. It doesn't have to be doctors or lawyers. They're known to make a lot of money. Hairstylists, they have this big fancy shop in the city. So now, because of what people think they make, a certain bracket of money they make, if they don't put a certain amount of money in there, there's going to be this stigma of they're the cheap ones. And that's not fair, because it's nobody's responsibility to pay for somebody else's event. It's nice to bring a gift, and we should definitely be mindful. I'm all for, let's try to help each other out, right? Like, if I know I'm making a party tomorrow and it's going to be a crazy amount, it's nice to know that all the weddings I've been to, and tomorrow when I make a wedding, the people are also going to come and it's going to help me. It's nice to help. It's very nice to bring something, because you're helping the people who are making the event. But it should not be something that if somebody doesn't bring that amount, that we should be upset at them, that tomorrow when they invite us to the party, we're not going to go, because how many times did we go? And we even remember, you know, like, people write this down at the end of the party. How much did you give me? So that when I go back to you, this is how much I got to make sure I bring you tomorrow. So I find it to be so weird, but this is what it is. What are we going to do?
That would be great if we can think like that. But let's be real. It's very hard to do that, knowing that you went somewhere and you gave $800 and they came and they gave you $150. You would have to be a saint not to feel any sense of, like, hey, what was that about, right? But Alana said over here, she said, if you're that loaded, cover the cost yourself. Don't expect your guests to pay for your expensive taste. That's my opinion. Yeah, in the perfect world, that would be great, being able to come in and the host being able to cover it. But like you said, Yocheved, it's very helpful. It helps out a lot whenever they can help you, especially during the time of, like, wedding season. But in many cultures, it's not like that. People come to a wedding, they don't make envelopes. They'll buy a gift, and anybody that made a money envelope, that goes to the gift to the bride and groom. It doesn't even go to the cost of the wedding. And then the parents shell out and pay for the wedding, both sides.
But don't forget, those weddings that you're referring to, have you been to those weddings?
I have been. They're different, definitely. They're
very different, okay?
Yeah.
You're not coming there for the food.
But guess what?
wasn't there to
the
dance with the
couple,
Khatan and
the
Kala.
couple is still married. The couples
I'm not
have beautiful
disagreeing
families,
with you, but it's so
beautiful life.
different as far as
It's
like if
different.
my
It's
table is
different.
$25 a person
It's different.
or $50 a person or
Different.
$75 a person, I get it.
I
But
agree.
yes, our base starting price right now at any restaurant, if it's not on Yishvo, and you just tell them the word wedding, everything gets jacked up, right?
Yeah.
Your DJ that charges you $2,000, if he hears the word wedding, it's the same amount of music, the same type of whatever, and it's going to be triple the price. I get it, right? We also base it based on the event. I understand that. But we are coming from a perspective of we are in the area where it's not, you can't make a wedding right now in our culture without people bringing some sort of help. Now, there was a question here. What do you do? I think Milana asked that question. I don't even know what time it is. I think we're running late. Milana said, what do you do if the other side wants a lavish wedding and you don't think it's necessary? You don't want to lose the shidduch either. So what do you do?
Honestly, I've heard of weddings, and this is, again, thinking outside the box. For some people, this can be very odd, but for other people, they compromised and they made it work. And it was an interesting thing to see. But one side, like his side, had more of like the lavish liquor and alcohol and all that. And the other side didn't because they couldn't afford it. So they said, you know what, you want to have the expensive liquor and all of that on your side, you go for it. We're not going to do that. And that's what they did. And they worked it out, right? Because one side was much more wealthy, and they said they felt like they wanted it for their guests. Like you said, Yocheved, their surroundings were much more wealthier. So for them, they needed to have certain liquor on the table. And for the other side, they weren't, that wealthy. So they said, we're not going to have that liquor. And you know what? They made it work. For some people, it was odd. For some people, they just went with it. And other people didn't even realize what was going on. So that was another option. Should the shidduch break off because of that? Absolutely not. Let's see.
Milana said it's usually 50-50. I so get that it's 50-50, but I'm also maybe it's very hard to speak up, but I feel like in certain aspects, if you really truly know that you and your husband are living very, very like ends meet style, and there's no way you can have a base chair of $400 because the other side is very easily able, forget the liquor part. Sometimes what you put on the table, just the amount of salads and the amount of food and entrees you bring is gonna raise the price, right? And it's not like they're gonna do half the table. Okay, this is the groom's tables, we're gonna charge them $50, and this is the bride's table, this table is gonna be $250.
But they did
It's
that.
usually one price, right?
So usually, yes, it's usually like that. But in that case, they did that. They charged the grooms much more money because they had much more fancier things on the table. And for the bride side, they charged less because they had less things on the table.
Imagine the next day, somebody that came from the groom side and somebody that comes from the bride side are having a conversation. And the girl says, the problem with the rib with the kind of kusta, she goes, which one? And she goes, the sea bass was so delicious. I'm like, sea bass,
I mean, look, and we both know this, that even in the lower budget weddings and in the highest budget weddings, people still find something to complain about. It's all about if a person is a pessimist or an optimist. If somebody's willing to look at the cup half full or half empty. You want to find positives from the wedding? You will. You want to find negatives? You will as well. So in the end of the day, that's really where it's coming to. And also, we want to, I think Gandhi said this. He said, if you want to see the, and I'm like re-quoting it, but like, be the change you wish to see in the world, right? So if you want to see a change in our community, be the change. And start, and you know what it comes back to? This whole conversation, your own self-esteem, your own self-worth. Meaning, if you know your own budget and you have the capacity to deal with people's stuff, meaning what they're gonna say, those words. First of all, why are you associating yourself with those type of people? Why are those people even in your event? People who are going to talk bad about you, people who are going to bash your event. Do you really want those people in your event?
Well,
You don't
sometimes you
have,
can't help it. They can be your
right.
relatives. So you
Exactly.
have to invite them.
So in that case, if you can't help it, then it makes no difference for your life. If you know how to establish healthy boundaries, and if you know your truth and what's good for you and for your budget, then you do what you have to do, because nobody else is going to pay your kids' tuition. No one else is paying your mortgage. No one else is paying for your food bills. So if you, and again, in the end of the day, what is it? It's about making face. We want to be a part of society. We want to be a part of our community members, and we want to be able to match one another. But it takes strength to say, you know what? I'm gonna make it different. During COVID, do you know how many families who were not able to afford weddings because they just didn't have money were so happy that it was normalized to make backyard weddings or weddings in shuls? Do you know how many families it saved them? People who were struggling financially, and nobody made fun of them because everybody knew, like, oh, it's COVID. Yeah, everybody's doing a backyard wedding. Everyone is doing a wedding in the shul, right? It was like a viral video on a thing on Facebook that they made a wedding in a garage. Like they made like a whole tent and all that, and they made a wedding in the garage. And you know what? The family, they're still living, and they're happy, and they're healthy, and they're doing well. So because as a society, it takes for us to make the change in order for it to be a ripple effect.
And you're absolutely right, because back then it was accepted, and that's the only kind of weddings. And you know what? The only close people were there because you were only allowed to have 30 people there, so you're only going to invite the closest people. So with everything that we're saying, if there's somebody that's supposed to get married and you're watching this is my takeaway from what me and Avi are saying. Avi, tell me if you agree with this. When there's a wedding being planned, there will always, and I would like to say 99%, but I think we can safely say always, be disagreements within the families. You go home to your parents, and your parents like, почему он так сказал? Он хочет видео за 10 тысяч, я нашел другого, он 7 тысяч возьмет. Or this flower guy, he wants for 15,000. Why do we need a couple for 10,000? We could just get whatever. There's always going to be this like mismatch of opinions. And if you as a couple are going to allow that to ruin your relationship and your bond, because now you have this like sour taste, even before you get married, between the families clashing, I'm just saying from my personal experience, this is just the beginning of this roller coaster road. In life, this happens in so many different aspects. How you're raising your child, who's changing the diapers, how many, like it happens so much that as a couple who's getting married, you have to learn to just say, whatever happens between the parents, let them figure this out on their own. This is not going to be interfering with my and my fiance's relationship. As hard as it is, because you want your parents to like the other side, but it's so normal. This tension is so normal. Don't take any part of this. My advice is let them figure it out. Try to stay away and do not take any part of this, because that's not what a wedding is about. That's not what's going to justify how you're going to live and what kind of love you're going to share and the amount of quality time you're going to spend together. This is just this very yucky moment in which we are living to please people.
Yeah.
And we are living to make sure that when everybody comes to the wedding, they're going to talk about our $5,000 dress that we sewed for ourselves, which I don't understand either. Who cares? Like, yeah, you look nice, you walk your child down the aisle, but we put so much emphasis on things, on money, which we spend on places where we could give this money to our children, to our young couple. You have 10,000 extra dollars. Nobody cares about the extra flowers and the extra everything. It's just such a shame. It's such a waste of money.
Yeah. When you said no one cares, and what's interesting is, because people are very much focused on themselves, that's where all the attention goes to. A lot of the times we put in so much energy into people are looking at me, people are going to judge me. Happens to be a lot of the time people are just really much focused on themselves, and the attention is really not on you. What I will say also is, as we're talking, Ilana mentioned over here, we're more afraid of what people will say about us. Instead, we should worry about what God thinks of us and the next world to come. Well, obviously, if we're now talking about religion, then yes, but not everybody is into religion, and even like being on a more spiritual level. Of course, if a person is a religious person and God fearing, to be able to say, the reason for me to get married is to build a healthy, happy home and a religious home. But for a person, a lot of the times it's also because they want to make this wedding. This was their dream, like you said, Yocheved, to give the family a way to argue when the families are arguing with one another. A lot of the times, giving them an opportunity to be able to argue, by arguing, it gives them their moment to express themselves. Not fighting. Arguing and fighting are two different
Right.
things, right? By arguing, they're able to share their hopes and dreams that they wanted for this wedding. Think about it. For 18, 19, 20 years, they're raising their daughter, and here's her big day. And for all these years, they had these plans that they're going to have this band and this music and this hall and this type of food and this entrance and all that. And all of a sudden, here he comes, and here his parents come, and they want to trump all of that and make all their plans. If you allow them space and vice versa to just share your plans and your thoughts and your ideas, obviously that would be the best case scenario. Unfortunately, sometimes because people don't have flexible thinking, they're so rigid on what their beliefs and what their wants are, and that's why all the clashes happen, because they don't have the ability to say, hey, I hear you, and I can be flexible, and I can bend my the way I wanted to have certain things. I can make adjustments. I can compromise a little bit here and there. Obviously, at the end of the day, and I agree with you, that the most important focus is not getting married, but keeping the marriage. Obviously, that the easiest part of relationships, the easiest part is to get married. And I always say this: marriages work 100% of the time. There's no easy marriage, no such thing. No matter who you are, how much money you make, small house, big house, career, no career, marriage takes so much work. And of course, you're working with it. And somebody said, can your wife, can your spouse, can your husband be your best friend? Somebody asked me actually this the other day. There was like an Instagram poll, who's your best friend, right? So I commented something, and somebody's like, hey, how come your wife is not your best friend, right? And I'm like, because my wife, it's a very different category of relationship. I don't put my wife on the same category as a best friend. It's a completely different thing. And like, for example, if a best friend said something to you, so yeah, you want to either call him out on it, you want to tell him how you feel, right? But sometimes with a spouse, you can't do that, because
Right.
you want to be able to have a healthy communication with them, knowing what the base is. What is your goal? You're building an empire with your spouse. You cannot just say anything on impulse, right? Because in the end of the day, there may be kids involved. There's an empire at stake here. So, of course, when relating to a spouse, you want to be able to do it in a way knowing that it has effects later on in the relationship as well. So in my opinion, it's a very different type of relationship, different than a best friend. Of course, a spouse is somebody you can share the most intimate things with. They say, like, when something happens to you, who's the first person you call, right? Yeah, of course, for many people, it would be their spouse. So does that mean they're the best friend? No, not necessarily. Just a different category of relationships. Let's see what else we have here. And Jella said, in the end, as long as the couple is happy, in the end, absolutely, I agree. Mona Lisa said, how much can you eat for $300 to $400? Come on, it's so effed up. I agree with you. I don't think it's only for the food. Actually, it is with the alcohol also, and all the decor and all the setups and all that. I was gonna say, I was thinking that it doesn't even include, now that I realize, it doesn't even include photography and music and all of that.
And then
It's a lot.
extra people sometimes
It's a
fly
lot,
in other
100%.
musicians and this and that. There's a lot of expenses.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Mona Lisa said, that's when I catered at their houses. It was the best. Oh,
Your
you did
sound went off
weddings.
a little bit. Your sound went off.
Yours also. Oh, hang on. Can you hear?
Not faith. I hear you, but it's faith. But I think, this conversation, can you hear me?
Yeah, faded.
We have so much to say on this conversation. My takeaway and a lot of what's going on here, with what is this one going to say? What is that one going to say? Why do we have the need to make the $400 chairs? Why do we have the need to make such like extravagant parties? Yes, if you can afford it and it's really like go, do what fits your budget. I get that. But at the end of the day, if things don't fit your budget, but you're only doing it because you want people to walk away like saying, wow, what a wedding. We have to keep in mind in every situation in life, we are going to be judged. Some people are going to say, oh my God, did you see that wedding? It was the wedding of the year. Others are going to walk away and say, oh my God, that was a wedding. They should have given me all the money. What kind of wedding was that? And then other people are going to walk away and have absolutely no opinion because they're just there to be there and they wish they were home doing other things. So which part of the like tug of war, like when you're pulling on the string, who do you want to win? Which side are you trying to pull at the end of the day? And at the end of the day, you're trying to pull your own string. You're trying to make yourself be comfortable. And if you're going to do something that's not at your comfort level and then be in a ton of debt because of it, so who you're gonna please? The people that said, "Wow, what a wedding!" Good, they're gonna stay for half hour, 30, like 2-3 days, and it's forgotten. That's all. So we really have to try to learn, and I think we have to get better at it to learn how to be happy with ourselves and block the extra noise from what people think and all the judgment, because you will never,
Yeah.
ever stop people from talking about you. It's
I,
never gonna go away.
I think, today we touched on so many different topics, whether it was dating or whether it was marriage or whether it was fighting for, this girl that you're, vice versa, fighting for the person that doesn't want you, right? I think the common denominator of all of this, of everything that we're talking about, is building your own self-esteem and your own self-worth and knowing your value, right? Just to wrap up, just to have a quick recap, a lot of this stuff comes from childhood, based on the words and the stuff that was said to us growing up, whether it was our parents, whether it was our principal, our teachers, our friends, our aunt, our uncle, our community members saying how we're no good enough, we won't make it, or vice versa, saying we're so proud of you, you've got this, you will be successful, you will make it, right? That voice that's inside our head from childhood grows up, and that adult person ends up being able to either build their empire or feel like they're no good enough and there's no place in the world for them. So if this somebody who's watching our live today, if this is something you went through, if you had abusive parents, if you had grandparents who were always in your face and constantly put you down and said how you're not going to be good enough, you can absolutely, what do you think, you're screwed now? Absolutely not. There is a way to reprocess it. There is a way to rebuild yourself. Don't have the victim mindset. We all, no matter who you are, where you come from, we all go through something in our lives that shift who we are. Of course, other people more than others, definitely, and I don't want to take it away from people who were sexually assaulted, people who were physically abused, people who were neglected. Obviously, absolutely, that is real pain, that is real trauma. And that's a very serious thing. People who went through these types of things need the proper support, need the proper guidance. But the point of what I'm saying here is, if something like that happened to you in the past, don't use that as a reason to stop living. Because there's so much more that we live right now. Yeah, there's so much challenges and difficulty and fear and in a scary world. But I said this before and I'll say it again. We live in the best time ever. You have access to anything you want. You have access to it. There are so many services. There are so many people you can connect with. There are brilliant organizations, amazing individuals that you can connect with, and people willing to help. Just reach out for support. If something is bothering you, if something is on your mind, and you feel stuck, that's your body's way of saying it's time to take action. It's time to take control. It's time to move forward. And sometimes you can't do that by yourself. Sometimes you do need support. Yocheved, once again, it's been such a pleasure to connect with you. It's such a pleasure to always to get to speak to you. And it's interesting how, like, we touched on so many different topics in so many different areas. Does that mean we're crazy? Does that mean something is wrong with us? No. It just makes us human, and we're born to this life, we're born to this family, we're born to this community, so let's make the best out of it. That's really my 2 cents. So,
I
drop the mic.
thoroughly enjoyed this live too. I think we touched upon topics that we could probably talk for days and days and
Sure.
days and days about. And that's what makes it really cool, that we're all in agreement to the chaos and to the craziness that's happening around us, and yet we continue to let the craziness and chaos without fixing the situation, right? Like, we're all in agreement that there's a problem, yet nobody's like saying, all right, we're going to be the first ones to put an end to this, and I'm going to make it different. So
I have something to end this live. I think it's a great opportunity. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? This is what I have. If you guys are going to walk away with something today, are you ready for this? Take note of this. How do I turn this over? Here we go. Ready? This is a sign where I have. Yocheved, you want to read it? Go for it.
Note to self: your feelings are valid. Your boundaries are important. You are doing the best you can. It's okay to ask for help. You are worthy and lovable. You're allowed to say no. You are capable of doing amazing things. It's okay to start over and try again. Great, amazing, beautiful.
That's it, guys. That's a message for you tonight. Have a good night. Yocheved, we got to do this again very soon.
Until next time, everybody, have a good night. We'll read your comments and feedbacks after the show. Bye-bye.
Yes.